hey, Ron, is there someone over there by the camera? Would you tell them we want to get started? Would you do that for me? Yes, we have 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, yes. Shoot, never mind, Ron, we're not ready. We don't have a quorum. Ken?
Yes.
This is Linda. Are you coming to the meeting?
Oh, I didn't know we had a meeting.
Yes, we're meeting tonight. And we're ready for our community meeting. Tonight's a big community meeting. Okay, we'll see you when you get here. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Okay, he thought it was a different night. I think he lives in Jefferson, so not too far, I think.
No. Quinnipiac Street.
Oh, Quinnipiac? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, let me go talk to Jay. So.
Should we just say we're waiting for one more presenter?
Yes. Wait, what?
Should we just let them know that we're
That's
waiting
exactly
for
what I'm
one?
telling him, yeah. Wait, let who know? Yes. So, folks, excuse me. We're just waiting for one more member of the work group to come here, so we'll be underway soon. He's on his way. Okay, so.
Here, I'm just going to bring this in. You don't have to use this, but.
There's someone else coming.
Yep.
Okay, so then we should, do you need an extra microphone?
If you can.
Yeah, we've got plenty. Yep, no, we definitely do.
So Jay, are you gonna let me? Okay. Yes, so we're going to be starting now. Good evening, everyone. Little louder, please. Good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to see such a good crowd here, and thank you for coming out tonight to participate in our community meeting on the MBTA Communities Act work group plan. We're going to do our best to try to give you the facts and answer your questions. I want to start by thanking the town manager, the town planner, Karen Phillips, and the folks here at the Senior Center, and especially the folks at the Department of Public Works who made it possible for all of us to be here tonight, despite the weather. I really appreciate everyone pitching in to make this possible. I also want to thank members of the MBTA Communities Working Group for all the hard work they put in over the last few months. I feel incredibly fortunate to have had such a knowledgeable and committed group of people to work with on this effort. So, actually, I think it would be good for work group members to introduce themselves now. Starting over here on my right.
My name is Mary Jude Pigsley. I'm one of the Holden resident appointees to the board, to the group.
My name is Elizabeth Brennan, also appointed as a resident of Holden to help out on the committee.
I'm Linda Longbouliel. I'm chair of the MBTA Communities Working Group and vice chair of the select board.
I'm William Holmes. I'm clerk of the working group and clerk of the select board.
James Corpus, Holden resident.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ron Barron. I'm with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, and we are working with the town to provide technical assistance thanks to a generous grant from the Mass Housing Partnership. So thank you all for coming tonight. We're very excited to do this. Thank you.
Ken Strom, MBTA Community Act Working Group.
All right, thank you all for being here. And so we're going to start off. I'm going to turn this over to Mary Jude Pigsley to give us some background on the law. Oh, the maps. Oh, yes, thank you. So they just reminded me I wanted to talk about the map. Before you, what you see is the GIS map of Holden. And you see, I wanted you to see just sort of what we were dealing with when it came to trying to work out a plan for compliance. If you see the dark green areas on the map, all of that land is owned by the city of Worcester. It is Worcester watershed land. And if you also see on the right-hand side of the map, the eastern side of the map, you'll see a lot of bright yellow. All of that is owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and much of it is owned by the state forest. And each of those comprise roughly a quarter of our town. You also see some bright red areas. Those are that's town-owned land. You see a little bit of orange. That's Audubon land. And I think you see some water in different locations. It's sort of light green on this map. And just there are various conservation lands, et cetera. So in other words, a lot of our land is restricted in one way or another, unavailable to us for zoning. So you also see some kind of, for lack of a better term, squiggly lines. Those are all streets, and all of those streets have dwellings on them. So you can see, especially in the middle of the map and in the right, the eastern side of the map, there are a lot of those lines. Those are all streets with homes, and that was also something that limited our ability to zone in certain locations. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Jude Pigsley.
Thanks. Before we talk about the what, I think we need to talk about the why just for a couple minutes. And I know when people start talking about laws and statutes and regulations, it sounds kind of like jibber jabber, but in this instance, it's really important because it's why we're here. So we're here to talk about the MBTA Communities Act, which is Massachusetts General Laws, Section 40A. It's not Section 40B. It's Section 40A. It's not affordable housing. And it's Section 3A of the zoning law, Chapter 40A, and it was signed into law by former Governor Baker in January of 2021. So 5 years ago, it's not new. It's not something that just came down the pike. It's been here for a while. It was actually enacted in the Senate unanimously, 40-0 vote, and in the House of Representatives, 143-4. So it had strong bipartisan support when it was adopted in 2021. The policy that you can see on the slide that former Governor Baker elaborated on is still the policy of the current administration. It's a very strong public policy in favor of affordable housing for seniors, affordable housing, available housing for seniors, available housing for young families, and it is enacted through communities that have or are adjacent to MBTA service. Next slide. So Holden is part of that because we are adjacent to Worcester, and Worcester has a commuter rail station. What the statute says is that these communities, MBTA communities, shall adopt zoning ordinances or bylaws. It doesn't say may, and it doesn't say might. When the statute says shall, it means you have to do it. So if anybody tells you that this is something that's optional or the town can opt in or the town can opt out, they're mistaken. It says shall. The town has to do it. What we have to do is adopt a zoning bylaw that establishes at least one district in the town of a reasonable size in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. And that means that you don't have to get a special permit. If the underlying zoning is industrial, you can build multifamily housing there without having to get a special permit if it is in the overlay district that we're going to talk about. We are only one of 12 towns that are still out of compliance, and the compliance deadline passed on January 1st. What the law requires is pretty clear. The whole main part of the statute is only 2 sentences. We must have a zoning bylaw allowing multifamily. It can't be age restricted, and it has to have a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre. And we're going to get into that in some pretty specific detail. So it requires us to have a zoning bylaw. It does not require us to build anything. It does not anticipate any specific project. It just anticipates having a bylaw that allows this density of housing. So the next one. So an overlay district just is like it sounds. There's zoning. Everything in town is zoned. It's zoned residential for minimum lot size of 20,000 square feet. It's industrial. It's commercial. This MBTA overlay sits on top of that zoning. So the underlying zoning remains. The only thing extra is if you want to do multifamily housing, that would be according to whatever the bylaw is that's passed, and you're going to see the details about that tonight. So it does not require anyone to sell their land. It does not automatically take away the zoning that exists. It doesn't change some of the existing zoning restrictions like height. Those all stay in place. It just allows this one use that's not currently allowed under the current zoning. Next one. So what happens if we don't comply with the law? There are 2 things. The Attorney General of the Commonwealth can enforce the law. That's what the Attorney General does. In July, the Attorney General issued a written advisory, she called it, that says by January 2026, 5 years will have passed since the act was signed into law. 5 years is more than sufficient time for each community to have achieved compliance. Therefore, in January 2026, the Attorney General is prepared to bring an enforcement suit against any MBTA community that has failed to both adopt the required zoning and apply for a determination of compliance from the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. So the Attorney General has very clearly, in writing, told us what's going to happen if we don't comply. Next slide. In addition to that, the statute itself, the second statute after the first 2 easy sentences, the first 2 paragraph, lists 4 specific grant programs that we are automatically ineligible for. We just can't even apply for them. One of them is MassWorks grants, which are the highways, sewers, water, bridges, very large public projects that we are ineligible for. The regulations that were adopted under this statute add another 13 categories of grants that the town of Holden might not get. Those are discretionary grants. They're not automatically unavailable to us. So that may have been a lot, and like I said, it's kind of jibber jabber, but I think it's important to understand that we're here because there's a law, and we have to comply with the law, and that seems pretty simple to me.
So, as you may recall, last year there was another plan presented at town meeting, and it was voted down. A lot of people reached out to me saying that they had not heard anything about the plan. They didn't really understand what they were voting on. They didn't know whether they even had to comply with the law, et cetera. So over the summer, I thought, how can we do this better? How can we do this better? And I thought, well, the way to do this better would be to get citizens involved, directly in putting together a plan for multifamily housing that would meet the requirements of the law in a way that would minimize the impact on the town. So that is why I organized this work group, and it was established by the Board of Selectmen on September 22nd, 2025, and we held our first meeting a month later, roughly, on October 23rd, 2025. And I feel like we pulled together a dream team. I really do. We have 2 members of the Board of Selectmen, myself and William Holmes. We had 1 representative each from the Conservation Commission, Ken Strom. We had the chair of the Planning Board, Scott Carlson, and we had Al Berg from the Finance Committee, who was for many years the DPW director here and knows this town inside and out. We also had James Sakarafos, who was one of our 4 town residents that were part of the Planning Board, the MBTA Communities Working Group, and Mary Jude Pigsley, Elizabeth Brennan, and one more. Victor. Thank you, Victor Panak. Sorry, Victor. Who is actually a town planner himself in Millbury. So we had people who had a lot of good skills to bring to the table. I should mention Mary Jude is recently retired from the Department of Environmental Protection. So that whole concern was covered. We had expertise on that issue as well. So it really was a dream team. And I really, truly thank you all for all the hard work you've put into this. We met weekly for months. And there was a lot to learn and a lot to understand, but I think we've put together a very good plan. So, as I said, our charge was to develop a plan for compliance with zoning for multifamily housing, as required by the MBTA Communities Act, in collaboration with the Town Manager's Office and our consultant Ron Barron from CMRPC. We were charged to solicit information from the Holden Housing Authority, the Wachusett Regional School District Committee, the Economic Development Committee, and other individuals or towns and community organizations as relevant. And we also aimed to solicit feedback from and educate the public about the Act and what it means for Holden. So there were a lot of different considerations that we included in our discussions. We wanted to minimize the overall impact on the town and residents. We wanted to preserve the look and feel of, and some might say the character of neighborhoods. We wanted to minimize the impact of traffic. I think we've all been stuck on Main Street at one time or another. We wanted to avoid zoning over existing single-family neighborhoods. We had understood from discussions around town that there was some concern about that in the community. So we decided to avoid zoning over existing single-family home neighborhoods. We wanted to avoid restricted and environmentally sensitive lands. As I mentioned, there's lots of protected land here in Holden and other kinds of land that is off limits, and we respected that. We also wanted to minimize the impact on infrastructure and schools and avoid burdening a single neighborhood. So that's an important reason why we split the plan into 2 different parcels, because we didn't want to put everything in one spot in the event that some of the land was developed that might have the greatest impact, an inordinate impact on a particular neighborhood if we could avoid it. So our process was that we examined parcels from the Holden GIS, the map that I showed you in the beginning, and also an interactive map provided by the state, which I will have Ken Strom explain to you in a minute. We identified and considered at least 20 locations current uses of land, and, as I said, the restrictions. We held public meetings. All of our meetings were videotaped and placed on the Holden Community Television website. And we did consult with the required town committees and organizations. The Economic Development Committee apparently is not currently active, so we were not able to consult with them, but we did consult with all of the other committees that we were required to. We discussed the impact on existing neighborhoods, traffic, and schools. So here is the state's map of excluded areas, and I'll turn it over to Ken.
Thank you, Linda. Yes, this is a map provided by Massachusetts GIS. Basically identifies in blue is water bodies, and gray is restricted areas for various reasons, as shown on the first slide, which is the Holden GIS, for all those colored parcels for which either are owned by the city of Worcester, state DCRs, Fish and Wildlife, a number of Massachusetts Audubon, White Oak, et cetera, either in fee or conservation restricted land, and also some watershed protection restricted lands, private property. So the gray also illustrates rivers and their buffers and potential intermittent streams as well, and wetland areas. So as you can see, it kind of consumes a large portion of our town. The first site that the committee decided upon is known as Holden Trap Rock, roughly opposite Millbrook Street on North Main Street. This is the westerly portion of the site, so that's 122A, running sort of north-northeast from mid-slide on the right to the upper left. So it's south side of 122A, opposite Millbrook. The site would set back from the roadway, and there was two connections to the roadway to access egress roadways, if you will. And that one is 39 acres in total. Next. This is the Halsted apartment site on Newbury Drive. That was formerly known as Winterberry Hollow during permitting process, and it was the reserve built by Sundin some 15 to 20 years ago, I guess. So it runs here from Salisbury Street on the west, the left-hand side, roughly opposite Fisher Road, through the site to, it goes off, but on the upper right, it connects into Newell Road, about a quarter mile west of Winter Hill Road, I guess. And this one would be about 11 acres. That's an existing apartment complex, if you will, and where we would infill some of those areas with additional housing.
Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Brennan.
You'll see that this is called Q&A. I'm going to give you both the questions and the answers right now, but there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. We just wanted to kind of highlight a few areas that we thought might answer some things in advance that you have less to be concerned about or confused about come the end of the presentation. The first one being, does the law require the zoned units to be, quote, affordable housing, which has a really specific designation in housing language? No, it does not. All the towns that are affected by the law did have the opportunity to build in affordable housing zoning or requirements, but Holden, we are proceeding in this zoning change without any affordable housing component. Secondly, does the law require the town to build water sewer lines or roads and traffic lights so that developers can build? Again, the short answer is no. It's also the long answer. It's absolutely no obligation on the part of the town to provide any infrastructure. This would be the responsibility of the developers, should there be a developer who decides to tackle either of these parcels. Will the law massively increase Holden traffic? We did a fair amount of research and got some data from our Department of Transportation and the Institute of Transportation Engineers about literally tracked traffic flow in other communities that have added multifamily housing compared to their single-family housing zoning. And the chosen sites also have alternative routes to town and the highway, so we felt more comfortable with their citing. But the numbers actually do break out, based on statistics, that multifamily housing generates 0.32 to 0.51 vehicle trips per unit during peak traffic, as compared to 0.94 trips for single-family homes. So there is going to be an impact, but we were trying to make sure we understood the true comparison to all the single-family home developments that Holden has already. Will the town need to build a new school because the MBTA Communities Act will cause a huge increase in K through 12 students? No, and again, these are sourced from various, we have a resource page at the end of the presentation, but there are studies that have been done in New England regarding adding multifamily housing to their towns, where the studies don't actually link a significant increase in school-aged children coming with multifamily housing. And part of that is because these units could be anywhere from 1 bedroom to 3 bedrooms. You know, they're depending on if a developer actually did come in, it's not guaranteed that you're going to have a lot of children per unit. In fact, it's the opposite, according to the statistics that are out there.
More answers.
More answers. Oh, sorry. The Halstead Apartments, we do have, as like you saw in the slide, that's one of the sites that is already has a multifamily housing unit on it. And it includes 192 units, and according to the town manager's office, these units are not sending large numbers of students to the Holden schools at this time. Actually, fewer. There was some concerns about that early on, and the tracking is bearing out that it's not, in fact, sending large numbers of students into the Holden schools. And lastly, will the new multifamily housing raise my taxes? And I'll just read the quote from the Pioneer Institute. Several academic studies have concluded that additional property tax and other revenues from new multifamily development usually fully compensate for the additional costs truly borne at the local level.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So, fortunately, we had an opportunity to submit the MBTA Communities Act Working Group Plan to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities for pre-review. They've reviewed it, and their response was that the proposed plan would put the town in a good position if adopted. That's the most positive feedback they are giving to anyone at this point. And it is a very good sign that if we do submit this, if we do pass this plan at town meeting, we can stop paying legal fees, put this issue behind us, and move forward in our town. So I want to explain next steps. Previous steps are the Board of Selectmen approved the plan as of December 1st. Then there was a planning board hearing. I will tell people that at the planning board hearing, there was a tie vote on a motion whether to recommend this plan. It was a tie vote, 2-2. When there's a tie vote in a meeting, the motion fails. But it did not fail because they voted against it. It simply failed because there was a tie. So I think that's important for people to understand. And then the Board of Selectmen approved the warrant in January, although it's going to be reopened on February 2nd. And then the special town meeting, where voters will decide on February 23rd, 2026. So, and we will be working to provide information and questions, answer questions from the public throughout this process, and that's why we wanted to have this community meeting tonight. We really wanted to get input from the community and hear your questions and your concerns and do our best to address them. So I would invite people in the room to come up to the microphone. We'd like to allocate roughly 2 minutes per person. So please come forward and answer and ask any questions that may be on your minds.
Robin Van Loo, 1A Road, Holden. This is just a small question. The height is limited to 2.5 stories?
Yes.
What do you do with a half a story?
I think that can be a little attic or, sort of a gable or something like that.
Okay, so
some
35 feet is the tallest. you
Yes,
can go.
yes, and there had been talk, I know, in town about worries about high-rises. There will be no high-rises. In our bylaw, we limited the height to 35 feet. So, and we did that very deliberately to make sure there will be no high-rises. So, are there other questions? I see some coming up.
Susan Marsh, 11 Bascom Parkway. Since a lot of towns have already made an overlay district, do we know how much developers are actually moving forward with this and what the chances are that a developer would want to do it in Holden?
Well, well, let me just say that development so far has been very slow. I believe Lexington was one of the first towns to break ground in late 2024. So that's 3.5 years, roughly, after the act was passed in 2021. The chances of development, I think, frankly, the chances, I'm going to go back to the maps here. I'd say, frankly, the chances of development are, on both sites, are, frankly, relatively low. Trap Rock is currently a working quarry by a family. It's a family business. And they say on their website they plan to quarry for decades to come. Now, there is some land, if you can look in the very northern part, there's some land there that could potentially be developed, or on the western part that's on the left side, potentially, who knows. And of course, as they say, they did say that they plan to quarry for decades to come. But of course, it's a family business, and I know my father was the third generation of a family business, and my sister and I decided we did not want to sell cars for a living, which is what he did. So the family business is no longer in operation. I mean, life is what happens when you're making other plans. You never know what's going to happen. So this site, as you can see, if you look very closely, I hope you can see it on the bottom portion of the purple striped land, which is the land that's part of our zone. And by the way, this was in the original plan last year. This was the one thing that we kept from the original plan. You see there are multiple buildings there. And so there's really very little space just north of that where buildings could actually be built. I would say less than half of the buildable land there. So it's really not a lot of room. And, Halsted, I believe, could build additional buildings now if they wanted to. So, but they couldn't build them at the same density right now. So I'd say, frankly, that the chances of development on both parcels are fairly low. But we did want to divide the parcels into two because we didn't want to concentrate everything in one place just in case it was developed, so that one neighborhood alone would be affected by any future development. So that was our thought.
I just want to clarify to make sure that everybody here and anyone watching knows. As I understand and as you've shared, no single-family home zoned areas are going to be affected in this. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. We did not zone over any existing single-family home neighborhoods, but we did zone over these apartments. Frankly, we assumed that it was highly unlikely that the Halsted owners would want to knock down a bunch of very profitable apartment buildings, deal with all the renter rebellion that might occur, lose the money from all the rents that are being paid, et cetera, and so forth. So we figured those would probably stay, and there would be a minimum of building should it ever even occur. So, other questions? Okay, well, oh, good.
I'm a little taller. Steve Cooley, 172 Jennifer Drive. I have a few questions. First of all, and this should be pretty easy, why didn't the planning board approve the project?
The only reason given at the meeting was that by one individual, one of the two people who voted against it, was that they didn't think that the voters would support it. How they came to that conclusion, I don't know. And it was not based on anything to do with the maps. It was not based on anything to do with potential impact on the town. Nothing was stated along those lines as a
So
reason.
only because they didn't think popular support was there.
That was my understanding.
Okay. Secondly, Governor Baker said that we need housing, according to the slide there. He also said we're losing 25 to 35-year-olds. I can't think of an age group that's more likely to have kids than 25 to 35-year-old people. I mean,
Actually,
am I right?
Actually, the average age of having children has increased over the last couple of decades.
It's
And
probably
so-
still mostly in that window, right? 25 to 35?
Well, I haven't looked up the details of that lately, but there are lots of women in their 40s.
I would be
who are
kind of
having
surprised if
babies
it
now.
wasn't. But, so let's just think about that for a minute. We need housing, we're losing 25 to 35-year-olds, and we're being told tonight that building is very unlikely. So we're not going to help, is what you're saying.
We might not, but we will comply with the law. And
Okay.
then we just have to wait and see how things work out.
And as I was reading through the literature here this evening, there's a lot of likelies, not likelies, et cetera, et cetera. And essentially, here's how I would summarize it, that if we approve this, it's absolutely painless. There's no cost to the town. There's no inconvenience to the town. Everything is going to be lovely, perfect. So my question is, if it's so painless, then why is the state willing to take us to court? Why are they essentially blackmailing us into doing this?
Because it's the law,
Okay,
very
I didn't
simply.
ask you.
That is
Okay,
the
but there's
case.
no good reason for a law if the only reason the law exists is to essentially force towns to do things. Why, in other words, this thing is supposed to generate economic activity. It's supposed to increase density, and it's supposed to increase housing supply. And we're being told tonight that we don't have to do any of those things and we'll still be in compliance with the law.
Well, I mean, statewide, it probably will increase housing supply. Mary Jo, do you want to add?
I
Thank
mean, the
you.
simple answer is what you just said. I'm sorry, I'm still answering the question. Did you not want to hear the answer?
Well, I was told, I was getting shouted down, so go ahead, yes.
I didn't hear anyone shouting.
Oh, from back here, just mumbled down, I guess.
So we have to do it to comply with the law. We are not here to evaluate the rationale for the law. We're not here to say it's a good idea, it's not a good idea, it will work, it won't work. Nobody has asked our opinion for that. We were charged with coming up with the zoning that complies with the law. The Commonwealth's Supreme Judicial Court has said it was enacted, it was constitutional, and also that it's not an unfunded mandate, which is a good way to say something like, the town is being asked to expend all of this money, and that's not fair. It's not being asked to do anything. So your thoughts about, is it well-founded? Is it good public policy? All great questions, but not for us. It's the law. So
Yeah,
like,
my
you don't want to
concern
pay
is-
taxes. A lot of people don't like the law, but you still have to pay taxes. So
Yeah, I
we still
understand
have
that.
to do it.
No, I guess what we're being told tonight, though, is no inconvenience, no cost, everything will be lovely. And I guess that's just a little hard to believe, given the background of this law.
We can't guarantee there'll be no inconvenience and no issues, but we did the best we could to comply with the law and minimize them.
How about no
You know,
cost?
both.
Can you guarantee that?
Well, these buildings, these 15-unit per acre buildings are very, very valuable. They generate a lot of revenue, and they're very valuable. And the taxes on them are high. So we will generate a lot of revenue from these buildings if they're ever built.
So then
And
the
that will make
likelihood
up
is a
for
developer
any,
would want to.
I'm
build.
sorry, what?
A developer then would want to if they're that valuable.
They might want to, but the individuals there, the folks at Trap Rock might not sell. In fact, it's probably likely they won't sell. And whatever building they do on Halsted, if they do it, really has very little room. And so there will not be a lot of units there.
And the fact of the matter is also that if this does not pass, the state can come in, zone a parcel to someone in a section of property where they will sell it to a developer. So we picked these parcels specifically because there's a low likelihood of having a direct impact in a short time frame.
Right.
If the state can sell to whoever they want to, they can just sell to the highest bidder without a care to the town residents.
Okay, so the state's going to be happy as long as we zone, even though we'll never build.
Yes.
Yes.
The law only requires us to zone. That's all it requires.
I understand. Sure, sure. We're not going to do any building. Okay, good.
That's right. So,
I'm sorry, I forgot to say my name when I first spoke, when I asked my question. Karen King, 45 Brunel Drive. And this is with the topic, but a little bit off of tonight's presentation. For those folks who have never read the 2018-2019 Holden Town Master Plan, I would suggest that you take a look at the housing portion of that. The housing portion of our master plan that's currently in effect is quite clear that the town of Holden does need multifamily housing. This was several years before this law was developed at the state level and passed legislatively. But it's something for us to keep in mind in terms of the needs of our community. We don't know if these parcels will be developed. We're not required to guarantee that as part of this law. But we are required as part of a democracy, and right now, even though it's sometimes hard to believe, we still do live in a democracy. And as part of the democracy, we have a state government and we have municipal governments. And we are required, when the state legislature passes a law, that municipalities have to comply with it. And we will have repercussions if we don't. And we know that we need to do a 2.5 override. And if the state comes in zones here in Holden and potentially sues the town of Holden for lack of compliance, or we become ineligible for grants that we may want to apply for in the future, that's going to make our life here very difficult.
okay. So, yes. Oh, good. More questions.
Hello, John Radone, Pine Settles Lane, Holden, Massachusetts. I'm pretty new up here. I'm a transplant from New York, and I dealt with many overlays similar to this. I was very involved in my local community, and one of the biggest concerns from the community I came from is local control. Now, this seems to be the state telling Holden what to do instead of us and Holden residents saying we're not comfortable with this. Regardless, I know it's a law, but the concern is local control. And we're losing some local control by doing this. So I'd like someone from the committee to respond to that. And I have a follow-up question, too.
Sure. So we are maintaining local control by adopting this plan instead of having the state come in and forcing a much more, a plan that will more likely result in building than this plan will.
Okay. A couple more questions. One was the trips per vehicle. What
Yes.
towns was this study made from, and how far
That was
Holden
from the
were they?
Institute of Transportation Engineers. I want to say it was a national study. Ken might know better than I would. That was suggested by Al Berg, who is the former DPW director.
What was the town that the studies were done? It wasn't Holden, was it?
It wasn't Holden. There's nothing about, I'm not aware of any studies specific to Holden.
I'm not a traffic engineer, or a transportation engineer, but it's the Institute of Traffic Engineers, I believe, or
transportation engineers, yeah.
engineers. Al Berg, who's a professional engineer, cited that study for us. But that's a trip generation report based on units. I think a lot of these are probably going to be more professional people, which you see at the Halsted.
So
More professional people than young. There's not many young families or young couples with children.
So there are roughly 760 units, 1 to 3 bedrooms. I'll go for an average of 1.5 bedrooms, probably for professionals, 25 to 30. I'm willing to bet they're driving more than one car.
Well, it says 1 to 3 bedrooms, but they may be single bedrooms. We don't know. It's up to the developer to decide what is profitable for him to build.
Right.
I'm on the road a couple of times a day just because I keep up getting to pick up the milk and stuff. So I think that I think the traffic study needs to be done a little deep, and one that would be done in Holden. And there's also concern about local schools. Being new here, and I know that Dorson Elementary School has trailers in the back. I mean, they're struggling for room as it is now. To suggest that the professional couples are not going to have children, especially with a 1 to 3 bedroom home. So it's, again, I think that study needs to be explored even more than just saying there's not going to see any increase.
Well, all I can do is rely on what I'm told about the Halsted complex, for example. My understanding from the town manager is that when Halsted was built, they really thought that we were going to have a big influx of kids, but in fact, that did not happen. And there are very, very few kids that come out of Halsted compared to the number of units there. So I can only rely on what has happened here in Holden previously at that complex. So,
And one more question. Are there any developers have shown interest in any of these properties?
not that I know of. They have not, no developer has reached out to our working group.
Are these properties currently for sale? Are they owned by the state or the county or the town?
They are not to my knowledge, they are not currently for sale. And I don't believe the state or the county has any role in them, so.
Can the state take them in eminent domain if they wanted to?
No, no.
Thank you.
Hi, Donna Wallace, 167 Fox Hill Drive. I learned something new. I've been paying a lot of attention to this, and I learned something new, I think, and I just want to clarify. The 11 acres at the Halsted site, that 11 acres includes the buildings that are already there?
Some of the buildings.
Some of the buildings?
Yes.
Do we know out of the 11 acres what could possibly be developed other than the buildings that are there already?
I actually have been trying to find out that number, and I'm working on getting it. How many acres would be open for building? I'm trying to find that number out. But as you can see on this map, it looks like it's less than half.
Yeah, apparently the southeasterly portion, strip across that southeast, there's a lot of driveways and parking currently. And you can see the two, or actually three, I believe there's 3 buildings on that north side. You know, so those are already multifamily buildings, 3-story tall, if I recall correctly. So they're already pretty dense as far as the development on that site. And it would only be to the very westerly portion there, where the driveway comes in off of Salisbury Street, that would really see any chance of development there.
Right.
Maybe some minor infill here and there, but I don't really see it.
So if we were calculating the number of homes that could realistically be built, making the assumption that they're not going to tear down the buildings that are there today, it's definitely not 11 acres worth of land.
No.
Okay. And my second quick question is on the Trap Rock property. My understanding that I've learned from Al Berg, who used to run the DPW, is that in town we are maxing out our sewer capacity. Is it fair to make the assumption on the Trap Rock site that any building that does happen there would have to be septic?
Possibly. The builder would definitely have to put in some sort of water and sewer. I'm going to turn this over to Mary Ju.
Septic systems would likely not be allowed. It would have to be a private groundwater discharge treatment plant, which would have to be permitted through the state, or they could figure out how to get additional sewer capacity, but that would be a developer's problem. I mean, we don't need to help them figure out how to build something there.
But it wouldn't be town sewer.
It could possibly be if they could figure out a way to get whatever capacity they needed, but it is challenging.
Okay, all right. So then, I think it's a fair assumption then on the Trap Rock site also that out of the 39 acres, some of it would have to be allocated to something related to their sewerage. So it wouldn't be 39 acres of homes.
No.
About half the property is also wetlands.
Half the property is wetlands?
Is it wetlands?
Okay, all right, thank you.
Probably just about a third.
Or a third?
In the northern
A
part.
third, yeah.
But the remainder of it is pretty well worked over at the quarry operations over the
Okay.
80 years or so that they've been open, I believe. Maybe.
So again, we're minimizing the impact,
Right,
potential
minimizing
impact.
the impact, yes.
Onto the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see another question or two. Good.
Eric Latham, 117 Mason Road. Nothing screams democracy than having to vote yes on something.
I'm having trouble hearing you. So
I said nothing screams, or nothing says democracy like having to vote yes on something. And that is what's most disturbing to me. But I'll put that one aside. The gentleman's comments about the study about the cars, I've looked up the ITE study. They do not publish anything but what has been kind of put together, from what I can tell, is public knowledge, is that it's pretty skewed towards cities. So New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston, and the surrounding areas there. We are nowhere near Boston. So saying that we're going to have 0.39 to 0.51 cars during peak time, I just think that's patently false. But even then, this working group did try to zone over a person's property without even reading the deed to the property. So I'm trying to understand how much research was done into these properties, knowing that we couldn't even look at a property record for a potential land. And then second, did any of you reach out to the owner of the Trap Rock facility to talk to them about this? Because we all know quarries run dry, and eventually that will become easily affordable, easily buildable land. So that's my questions.
So do you want to take this, or do you want
I
me
just wanted to go back to the black and white map. We were charged with, under the regulations, to use the state's map, and they excluded areas. The parcel that we looked at on Bailey Road was not excluded by the state. So if there was a mistake made, it was because we used the state's map, which is what we were told to do. So whatever, it was not, I think what the language in the regulations was, they were excluding things that had conservation restrictions, agricultural preservation restrictions, defined things, and I don't know what the nature of this restriction on the property was, but it was not part of the state database that the state gave us to work with.
Okay.
I would also add that we followed all legal processes for informing any landowners who might be affected. And this individual landowner did come forward, and she did have paperwork showing that she had a conservation restriction on her land, and we immediately took it off the plan. Immediately took it off the plan. Respect for
Yeah,
her.
well, I understood that, but I personally, when I saw, I watched every single meeting group here online, and when I saw that, we were looking at person's properties, and I could easily see, looked at you could look at the property records, they're all online, and you can easily see the deeds, and you can easily read that, and I reached out to them saying, hey, this is what looks like this coming down. So again, at that point though, my questions are, knowing that, did any of you reach out to the owners of Trap Rock, and did any of you, have a discussion with them? You did say that on their website, they're looking for decades to come to be able to operate, but quarries do run dry, so.
Quarries do run dry, and they can be redeveloped, but it's a very, very intensive process. I did a little background reading on that, and it's not easily done. That's yet another reason why it would be hard to develop that site. We notified all of the affected landowners as required by law. We followed the full legal process, and I think that if one individual landowner can come forward with documentation saying that her land was off limits, the Trap Rock company, which is Massachusetts Broken Stone, which is a multi-million-dollar company with lawyers, I assume, would know to come forward if they had any concerns.
Can those communications be made public?
I'm sure they could. They came from the town manager's office. It's just the routine process that always happens when an issue goes to the planning board. The planning board notifies landowners 2 weeks before the planning board hearing. There was a hearing, they had an opportunity to attend, and they did not do so.
Okay, thank you.
Jonathan Buck, 221 Union Street here in Holden. came here tonight to learn facts. And I hear some FAQs, and I've been informed of a lot of assumptions, not a lot of facts. In fact, I'd even challenge some of the things that have been cited, but nevertheless, I think it's important that the town understand that when you apply this zoning overlay on a piece of property, you're increasing the value of that property significantly.
That's
right?
true.
So Holden Trap Rock, which without the zoning overlay made plan to mine for decades, could change their mind tomorrow. And I'd actually point, there's actually a development that I'm quite familiar with, intimately actually, in Connecticut. It's called the Quarry Walk. It's a beautiful development. You should do some research on that.
I actually did find that one online.
Okay.
It can be done. It can be
Yep.
done. It's not impossible, but it is a very difficult undertaking, and it would be very expensive for a builder to build there. They would have to deal with the water and the sewer. There's no water and sewer there. And this parcel actually was identified by Al Berg, and he pointed that out to us, that there was no water and no sewer there. Also, redeveloping a quarry is very expensive from the reading I've done about the Connecticut site and one other site that I read about out in Western Mass.
So one of the things that, I think we need to seriously consider is the fact that it's not safe to assume that nobody's going to build tomorrow, okay? And I say that because has anybody on this board, or on this committee, done any research to understand what the current rental market looks like in Holden today?
Well,
what's our vacancy rate currently in Holden? Do we know that?
We do not know the vacancy
I think
rate.
that's important to consider, because I think you're going to find that Holden has a very low vacancy rate, very high rents, and Selectman Linda, I know that you said these properties are of very high value at this density, right?
Correct.
It may not be out of question to demolish the portion of Halsted, right? When those leases expire, developers, property owners, commercial property owners, I used to work for a multifamily developer, okay? So, their motivations, their intentions, they change. Something like this could really change this town, and I think we really need to think long and hard about this. The other question that I have for the committee is, why is there only one overlay plan being proposed? I mean, we already went down this road several months back and proposed a plan that failed at town meeting. We're now going to a special town meeting with one plan. I'm feeling a little backed into the corner, if you know what I mean. I'd like to hear the committee's opinion on that.
Well, this plan was put together with input from a variety of individuals, including town residents, and that was an important reason, I think, to defend it. I think it's important to have that kind of input on something like this. The remainder of your questions really go to the question of should we follow the law, and we have to follow the law. Either we follow the law or the Attorney General comes in and zones for us. That's really the bottom line. That's really the bottom line. Does anyone else on the committee want to say anything?
Just want to piggyback on what Linda and James said, and the reason I keep pointing to that black and white map is that this committee looked at that map and chose what we believed made the most sense, given that we have to do it. So all these questions and comments about rental rates and traffic generation, nobody's asking us to make any evaluation of that. We are making an evaluation of the best place, and we chose those, taking into consideration those things, but not for the entire town. If we don't adopt this plan, and I think it'd be very difficult to go to town meeting and ask people to have option A, option B, option C, option D, and to hear all the arguments about that. So we chose what we believe, and you're free to disagree with us, that this was the least impactful to the town and establishes the absolute bare minimum that we're required to do. So if it does not pass town meeting, this is the map that the state will use, and the state will pick one of those white areas, two of those white areas, four of those white areas. The state will pick something that nobody in Holden has any input on. So you can choose to defer to the state to pick a place there that is not either of the places that we recommended. And it is just a recommendation, and the voters at town meeting have to choose whether to adopt this proposal as a zoning overlay district or to ask the state to adopt the same one or something else. But to spend a lot of time talking about is it a good idea, is it a bad idea, is not really productive. But I think
But
these
it
are
is
all
your job to
comments.
sell this
Can I just
to
finish?
the town.
I'm not finished talking yet. I think these are all the same kind of things we talked about. Very aware of the schools, very aware of the traffic. These are all, obviously, these are things that we were concerned about when we considered it. But at the end of the day, we needed to have a plan in very short order in terms of backing something out from a February special town meeting date. It did require weekly meetings beginning in October and continuing on until now. And as Linda said in the beginning, I'm very proud of the work that we did. And we had a variety of opinions around the table. We had expert input. And it's obvious that some people don't like it. It's not universal. There would never be a plan that everyone likes. But this is what we have that's going to go to town meeting.
I understand you didn't create the law, but I think too many people are in support of the law. And I don't think we have the bike lanes in town to support this.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, oh, careful.
Peter Marconi, 24 Putnam Road. Many in town know me by my nickname, Skip. I would like to thank everyone for coming out tonight, having it on your calendar, being here on time. I appreciate that. A couple of clarifications. At the beginning, the young lady on the left mentioned either affordable or available housing. Which one is it?
Available.
Available? Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
There's no affordable housing in this plan.
Okay, well, I heard the word affordable at the beginning. Ms. Brennan mentioned the Trap Rock site as having alternate access routes. What alternate access route goes to the Trap Rock site besides Main Street?
Well, there's opportunities to go off of Main Street to get around Main Street from Jefferson, whether they're going out through Paxton and Rutland or they're going down Mount Pleasant Ave towards 190. It's just that not every single car that leaves the Trap Rock is going to have to travel down Main Street to get to the other end of town.
Right.
There's alternate traffic patterns to get to the maze too, but I don't know how often those are used. Can I ask who put this together? Who is the publisher of this handout that went out earlier this evening?
That was not I. That was not our committee, I can tell you that.
Just wondering who owns this, because one of the bullet points here talks about rational people see that it's in capital letters, not a big deal. Well, you know, to some in town, it is in capital letters a big deal. So I'm not quite sure we've got facts tonight. We got a lot of opinions, and we've heard about recent studies and research in Massachusetts. If I use those as footnotes on a thesis, the professor would never have bought that. They need specific studies, specific items to point to.
The studies are in the references at the very end. You know, it's a balance between providing enough information and making people's eyes glaze over
Very end
at a
of
meeting
what?
like this. Oh, sure,
I see-
yes, at the very end.
I
Hang on.
see research in Massachusetts found. What research in Massachusetts? Oh, is that on here?
Yes. It's at the very end of, not on there, no, it's not on there.
Well, that's what I
But you
have
can get
to
that.
look at.
Let me also mention, I forgot to mention something that I wanted to mention. We're going to have a website. There'll be more information on the website, and we'll be distributing that information. We do also have a survey which will be on the website, and is at the end of this slide deck. You can use your phone to use the QR code tonight if you want to answer the survey, and we can get your input that way as well.
And earlier you put up Governor Baker's quote about 25 to 35-year-olds that
Yep.
Mr. Cooley referenced earlier. I don't think available housing is the reason 25 to 35-year-olds are leaving the state, honestly. There's much more bigger issues for that group to deal with than available housing at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I had one more thing, but I can't remember what it was. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Will the PowerPoint be on the town website so that
Hang
people
on. Karen, can you come to the, that's okay.
Sort of following up with the gentleman, will the PowerPoint be on
Yes.
the website?
It will
so
be
that
on,
people
there'll be a link to
can
the
look?
PowerPoint on the website.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Michelle Forsman-Menser, 6 John Street in Holden. I understand this is a law. I understand we need to comply. I thank you guys for your time, for trying to take the best interest of everybody here in this town and making it probably the best options based on what we had the last time that was voted down to what's now. My question is kind of forward thinking. Being that I don't trust the state legislators, I can see them in 5-10 years saying, no, this has to happen. If they mandate building on these sites that we've identified and the owners are not willing to sell or they're not able to be built on, would they have the right to then take and rezone according to what they choose, or is this the 50 acres and they can't mess with that?
They would have to pass a new law to make that happen, which I think would get a lot of opposition. I think that would be even more unpopular than this law is, frankly. So I don't see that as a likely outcome at all. I can understand why you're concerned about it, but I don't really see that happening because there would be so much opposition. And the idea behind this was to give landowners and private developers an option to develop this housing where it could not exist before. I think our town doesn't fit this description, but there are towns where the zoning all requires like 1 acre per single-family home, or zones along those lines, and they severely limit multifamily housing. And I think part of the reason they wanted to do this was, I think a major reason they wanted to do this was to try to open up some of that land. So,
And just one more question. Is there any inkling that if this does end up being developed, that we will be required to have bus service or train service to the town in any way?
no, they would again have to pass another law to make that happen. And again, that would be an expense for the state in a lot of ways. So, yeah.
you.
So no, there'd be a lot of pushback on that too, I think. Thank you.
Hello. Hello, I'm Michael Masloff, 42 Brennan Way. I just want to bring another set of opinions that address some of the things that we were talking about today. On November 26, 2025, issue of the Holden Landmark, there was a letter to the editor from Andrew Mikula from the Pioneer Institute. The Pioneer Institute, as many of us know, is the premier conservative think tank in Massachusetts. Let's take a look at what he said about some of the issues we've discussed tonight. I think it's interesting to see what his conclusions were. This was in a letter to the editor that he wrote and addressed to the town of Paxton, who was at that time addressing their compliance with MBTA Communities Act. In terms of infrastructure and schools, because we've talked about schools, he says, some costs associated with new housing, such as for emergency services, will be borne at the local level, but providing water and wastewater infrastructure is the developer's responsibility. Meanwhile, the relationship between housing development and changes in school enrollment is empirically tenuous. I have a background in biostatistics. I can tell you empirically tenuous means not a good chance. In terms of, on the issue of pace of change, he says, some towns complying with Section 3A, such as Lexington, have seen a faster than anticipated pace of development and applications. However, studies have found that typically no more than 2% of properties are redeveloped annually after zoning is loosened. So I don't think we're talking about a land rush, an Oklahoma land rush, once we do this. In terms of traffic, he says, new housing developments tend to increase traffic congestions nearby. To the extent that the Section 3A zoning districts are located in village-like areas, the resulting housing developments will likely produce less traffic than a similar project allowed under current zoning. This is, again, the conservative view from people who, and I've been on the other side of discussions with these folks, people who do a terrific job of looking at facts empirically. I want to thank the committee for doing a terrific job.
Thank you so much. Anyone else before we close tonight?
Ben Smith, 47 Birchwood Drive. I just had a question. I looked it up, and I believe 165 communities have figured out a way to be in compliance. Is that right? Okay. Great. So I guess I just moved to a comment. If this were a town meeting, I probably would have called the question because honestly, I feel like we just need to put this as a town behind us. I really appreciate the work you all have done. I really value the effort and time that you put in. I did learn a lot from the presentation, and I really appreciated it. We heard a lot about democracy. I would say I'm very proud of Holden. I like this town because it's sensible, because we're moderate. I mean, if you want to talk about participatory democracy, that's what got this law passed in the first place. We all vote for our state reps and senators. That went through a bipartisan process. I don't even know, I'm not even sure I like it. I'm not even sure I do. But you guys were very thoughtful in putting this together, and I'd much rather have this than something forced on us by a special master. This room is full. I mean, this is participatory democracy. Peeking around snowbanks to get here on a weeknight, right? Like, we might have philosophical problems with how that law got passed or all that background, but look, I mean, participatory democracy is what got us here tonight. We already voted against this. It could well happen again, but I would hope not, because as I see it, there's a sensible path forward. And that is, I mean, if you think about it, and we've heard it from y'all already, we vote against it, and then we're just compounding legal fees in a year that we're also asking the taxpayers, me being one of them, to pass an override. The library could close. And what are we doing? This is politically divisive. There's misinformation on WatchUChat. This was very informative. And you're not being forced to vote for this. You could vote no. You could vote against it. I really hope you don't, because I just want this particular issue past us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you all very much for coming out on this cold, freezing night. It's wonderful to have such a great audience. Drive safely.